Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank you guys all for joining us today as we talk a little bit about emotional intelligence in the workplace. We're super excited to have Hallie Crawford join us today. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Please, if you're able, we'd love to have your cameras on, but do whatever you feel comfortable with. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can privately message me or you can wait until the end once we hit the Q&A portion. So we'll be here to answer any of your questions. We hope you enjoy this. So let me just share a little bit about Hallie Crawford and we should be good. And just another reminder, just make sure if you are able to stay muted as well to just kind of remove any distractions that Hallie may have. So let me admit just a couple more people really quick. Okay, so Hallie is a certified career coach, a speaker, author, and national career expert since 2002. Her company, Create Your Career Path, is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and she is regularly featured in the media like Forbes, CNN, Money Magazine, and WSJ, and has an undergraduate and graduate degrees from Vanderbilt University and the University of Illinois. And with over 2,000 success stories, her team of coaches and resume writers help professionals find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning to go to work. And who doesn't love that? And their website is createyourcareerpath.com, and I'll share all of that information. But enough of the talking. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Hallie Crawford so she can take it from here.
Thank you. I love that intro. I mean, I know that the last part, jump out of bed in the morning, that's basically my elevator speech, but it makes me smile every time. And emotionally or being emotionally intelligent in the workplace can help you be more excited about your job. So how about that for a segue? So quick reminder, you will receive a copy of the recording today. I'll give you an email address that you can use to get a copy of our slides if you'd like. And I'm going to be looking back and forth just a little bit just because I have two screens here. So that's what that is. And as I said a moment ago, if I do hop off video, I'm not gone. It's just because I notice it'd be a little bit better for my internet connection because I want to make sure you guys can hear me and see my slides. So I think most of us know and have heard about emotional intelligence, or EI, whether it's in the workplace and otherwise. But I don't know that everybody knows, like, okay, how do I practically, implement this? So the advice that we're going to give you today, this is our website, and the advice we're going to give you today is advice that we give to all of our clients, whether they are managers or not, just like whether they're an individual contributor, like it doesn't matter. Emotional intelligence in the workplace is critically important, and it will help you be more effective regardless of the type of organization that you're in or the level that you are in your career. We've been coaching and training since 2002. So I'm actually, I don't know, I might sound like I'm 12. Maybe I used to say 12 when I was in my 20s. I sound younger than I am, got a lot more gray hair going on under here, and I turned 50 this year. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I'll tell you, it's one of my favorites because it closely aligns with some of the skills and coaching tools that we're going to give you all today to help you enhance your emotional intelligence in the workplace. So we'll talk a little bit about, EI and why it's important, of course, but what we want to kind of train you on today a little bit is some of the strategies and tools that you can use and implement right away that will help you be more emotionally intelligent right away. Okay. So why is this important? Emotional intelligence is so important because workplace conflict, which can be attributed to lower EI or not as good of communication or miscommunication in the workplace, is a huge deal. Most of the difficulties in organizations, if you look on this slide here at the top left, they come from less than optimal relationships between employees. It's not because employees don't know what they're doing or they lack motivation. Now, we all know that in some cases, those other things are the situation. I get it. But the majority of the time across the board, it's more about difficulties or, in communication or in strained relationships within a team or between a manager and their team, et cetera, et cetera. And a typical manager, and this was actually really stunning to me when I first saw this statistic, is that they'll spend at least 25% of their time, up to 40% of their time, dealing with workplace issues. It's 1 to 2 days of every single work week. And this is why some of our clients will literally tell us, I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to do, I mean, this sounds bad, but I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to deal with people issues. And I see someone is nodding. Yeah. So in some cases, people just literally don't want to have to deal with this kind of stuff. The emotional intelligence element can help get this or have this be a little bit better and move the scale in the right direction. And part of why this is important is if you take a look at our ideal career model, we're not going to get into all the pieces here, but work environment, what we have found over doing this for 25 years is work environment is a make or break for people's satisfaction, their motivation, and their success in their jobs. I can't tell you how many times someone will come to us and say, I feel like I should go be a chef, or something completely different than what they're doing now. On a webinar we were doing earlier this week, actually, the person literally said, like, I kind of feel like I should go be a school bus driver because I need less stress. So the point is that we have had clients come to us who discover through the coaching that they're actually in the right type of role or the right type of industry for them, but they're in the wrong work environment, at the wrong company, in a department, or with a boss that doesn't work for them. And it's just not, acceptable and okay. And they will leave that job because of the work environment. So out of all of these pieces of our model, they're all critically important, but work environment is a make or break. This is why we have to pay attention to emotional intelligence. So here's our agenda for today. Short and sweet. Really in-depth information, but quick overview is emotional intelligence. We'll talk about how it's defined and what we mean by this. 3 foundational tools that will help you develop and be more emotionally intelligent. We'll give you some resources along the way, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. And I'm going to be mindful of time because I want to make sure we leave a good amount of time for Q&A, because I'm imagining there's going to be a lot of really good questions about things that I may not have covered yet, and I welcome those. If anyone, in addition to getting the recording from today, would like a copy of our slides, you can feel free to email us at admin@createyourcareerpath.com. We'd be happy to get those over to you. And maybe Yavi can put those in the chat box or that email address so that you have it as well. Please feel free to put questions in the chat starting when you think of them. You don't have to wait till the end. If we have a critical mass of questions kind of along the way, I'll stop and I'll answer them. But if you don't feel like you have to remember it for later on, just feel free to put it in anytime. Okay, that's our agenda. So this whole emotional intelligence thing, the book, and it was sort of invented, I guess I could say. Daniel Goleman is the quote unquote father of emotional intelligence. And he wrote this book, Working with Emotional Intelligence. I like this one because it focuses more on your professional life. What I'll tell you is there's a lot more books that have come out related to this, like leading with emotional intelligence and those types of things. And I think those can be incredibly helpful too. But as a starting point, I think this is a good kind of baseline book. And basically, it could be EI or EQ. I mean, I kind of use it interchangeably, just FYI. But basically, how to define it is you as a professional, whether you're a manager or not, just any level in your organization, it's getting better about understanding, using, and managing your emotions, the positive ones as well as the negative ones, because they both need to be managed in constructive or positive ways to help you relieve stress, communicate effectively with others, be empathetic with others, overcome challenges that you have as a professional, but even within your team, and help diffuse conflict. And I think I spelled diffuse wrong. I apologize for that. I actually do know how to spell it correctly. So emotional intelligence is you managing your own stuff. But I would also argue it's about communicating effectively once you've done so. So we're going to talk about both and how you can foster better emotional intelligence for yourself and for others within your organization. Emotional intelligence helps you build stronger relationships at work and achieve your goals, obvious things. The relationships at work, as we said earlier, are critically important to whether you're going to be successful or not, and also satisfied too. The other thing that we like, and one of the main things about emotional intelligence and developing it for yourself, is getting a better sense of self-awareness about what you're feeling at any given time and how that's impacting your communication, your actions, etc. So emotional intelligence can also help you connect with your feelings, turn those intentions that you have or your goals and desires into action, but the right action too, and help you make informed, good decisions about what matters most to you and your team. So hopefully this makes sense. I'd love to hear in the chat box if other people have other definitions that they've seen about emotional intelligence too, and the other things that it impacts at work, because I'm open to ideas, but this is kind of a bottom line. On the next slide, there are different or kind of two different ways that you can think about the categories or types of emotional intelligence, if you will. Okay. And this is from BetterUp website. So there's the practical things, right? Like being an emotionally intelligent employee is about being on time, getting your work done, meeting your deadlines, being reliable, trustworthy, that type of thing, respectful to your coworkers. There's some practical things, obviously, that go into being emotionally intelligent. Because, for example, if you are always late to meetings, that says something about you. And it also can make the other people feel in those meetings that you're not respecting their time as much. So these different things, whether you do them or not, actually communicate a message to the people that you work with, positive or negative, depending on what's going on for you. So you do need to think about these practical considerations and how important these kind of tangible things are to emotional intelligence. They play into it. And then there's the emotional element or bucket of EQ. And this is that you feel respected and you're being respectful to other people, that you're listening effectively and you feel heard by other people, networking, connected with your coworkers, getting a sense or feeling of like meaning from your work and purpose and accomplishment. All of these things are really important for emotional intelligence as well. So think of it as kind of these two basic buckets overall. And as you start to kind of assess where you are on the scale of EQ, if you will, you want to think about these four critical elements to emotional intelligence. It is about the self-awareness, like we said earlier, but it's also about self-management, social awareness, and relationship management too. So a couple of things, and I just wanted to piggyback on these and kind of dig deeper into them for just a second, is this self-awareness is about being in touch with and understanding how you're feeling, what's going on for you, and how that's impacting your reaction to someone else, how you're communicating, and the decisions that you're making. That's a really critical piece to things. Using me as a quick example, I'm more introverted than extroverted. I tend to process things first and then make a decision. And I can't always have an answer for my team necessarily. So I have to remind them sometimes, remember, I'm a little bit more introverted than extroverted. Let me think about that and get back to you. One of the other self-awareness things for me is that I am a very all over the place thinker. One of my strengths is strategic. The bad part about that is that I tend to have to do a brain dump first before I communicate with someone about something specific. And I have to be careful about not brain dumping on my team because that's going to flood them and overwhelm them, and I'm not going to get as good of an answer. So the self-awareness is a lot of different things. It's awareness of, can you intuit when, a coworker or someone is saying they're fine, but they actually aren't? Or yes, they're willing to take on a project, but you can tell they really don't want to do it. And you should actually talk about it for a minute. Are you aware too of your nonverbal communication and how it impacts others? These are just two examples. But another piece of the self-awareness among many is understanding your personality type and your strengths and how that influences how you communicate and come across to other people and how you make decisions and how it interacts with other people too. Because, for example, some of my team members, I, in some cases, may make really quick split-second decisions, and I need to think about things a little bit more. And so I'm aware of that with them, and I take overnight before I might write them back. an email, response to their communication. So that's number one. Number two, self-management. We just started to talk about that already. Couple of examples here. Are you able to stay calm during conflict and stress, and able to, or do you have tools to like diffuse it a little bit? Do you know when to ask for help? And again, going back to what I just said, I know when I need to self-manage. Of course, I'm not perfect at all. So I'm not trying to say that, just using me as an example, but I know when I might need to step back for a second. And I've also empowered my team for them to tell me, like, look, Hallie, I think you're making this decision too quickly. We need to think about this a little bit more. So I ask for help in the sense of, I'm clear with my team too about what my strengths are and where I need assistance. And I invite them to push back at me. And that's part of the value of having a team around you. Number three is social awareness. Can you tell when you're making someone uncomfortable? Can you tell when your team isn't doing as well as they could be? Are you aware when someone is saying one thing, but they actually mean another? They're saying yes, but you can tell that, they don't feel great about it. And then finally, number four element to emotional intelligence is relationship management, and making sure you're managing your relationships as effectively as you possibly can, with listening, with handling conflict, with keeping things light, or picking someone up when they need some support and some positive affirmation. So as we're thinking about all of our tools today that we're going to be discussing, and I'm just going to move my computer just a little bit closer. I want you to keep kind of these four elements in the back of your mind, because the tools that we're going to discuss today will help support all of these different elements. And you may want to think about for yourself right now, which of these do I need the most help with? Is it the self-management, or no, it's the relationship management? So pick one where you think you need the most assistance and the most growth, because that's where you want to focus your action steps that we're going to be talking about today. On this next slide are some foundations for emotional intelligence in the workplace. So what we're going for with the tools, the three tools we're going to be talking about today, are tools to help you develop all of these things on the left-hand side of this slide. Greater trust between you and your coworkers and within your team. Being more empathetic as a leader, for example, or just as a coworker. How to develop and encourage greater honesty and effective feedback between people, so that they're not saying one thing, but they actually mean another. And you can actually get really good ideas from people and honest input like my team gives to me. Greater understanding between the people in your team, and more effective listening skills. So all of these things are really foundational tools and things to create that will help you be more emotionally intelligent and create a culture of that within your organization. Okay. Here are some common obstacles. And after we do this first poll, we're going to get into our foundational tools. But here's some of the things that we find. And if we could launch our first poll here, that would be great. That are the most common obstacles with our clients to being emotionally intelligent: regulating their emotions, not communicating effectively, reading certain situations. And listen, there could be more. We totally get that there's a lot of different obstacles to this. These are the top that we have seen with our clients. So pick which one you think is the most for you. And it's a good idea while you're doing this, by the way, everyone, please, is to identify for yourself what your most common obstacle is, because then you can be on the lookout for when you're doing that or when that's happening, and switch over to one of the tools that we're talking about today to help you overcome it. Looks like the top two are kind of neck and neck so far. This is a good time for me to drink some water. Okay. So it looks like everybody has answered, which is awesome, or at least close to that, if I'm reading it right. And we've got neck and neck 44%, which is really interesting to me about the emotions and communicating effectively. Totally understand this. The regulating emotions, I think so much, and we've actually been talking about this within our team of coaches, because the coaches I have on my team, they do the coaching for our organization now. I'm running the business more. And what they've been telling me is that, like, I just think with layoffs, people worried about the economy, people changing jobs post-COVID, all this different stuff, that there's a lot of emotional stuff going on for people. And so I totally understand that. And please know that you're not alone. And this is not we don't expect you to be perfect about this. We are not wanting you to turn into a robot. It's more about understanding, okay, what am I feeling? Is this appropriate to, and is this an appropriate time to take action based on what's going on for me? Is it an appropriate emotion to share? And if it is, how do I do so? So just being aware of those emotions in the first place can enable you to deal with them in a productive way and to process them a little bit over time as needed too. And then the second one, not always understanding how to communicate effectively. We're going to deal with those things today. So both of those are perfect. Thanks for sharing. So here's our foundational tools that we want to throw out there to you to use based on your situation and what you think is going to make the most sense for you and your situation. And you can always make some changes or slight adjustments to these tools, again, based on what's going to make the most sense for what's going on for you. And it's creating an agreement with people that you work with so that emotional intelligence can come to light or be leveraged more effectively, or there's a safe space for that, if you will. Empathetic listening and curiosity. And I'll show you what we mean by those. There's going to be specific tools underneath each one. So the first tool that can help support being more emotionally intelligent at work, with your coworkers, with people one-on-one, but also within your teams, is creating an agreement on how you're working together more effectively. And some of the suggestions here are on the right-hand side of this slide. And this is about having an open, as honest as possible, direct conversation about how, can we work together effectively? What are our goals? Establishing guidelines for communication, for example, how you're going to handle tasks and meetings, the different roles or who plays what different role in a project so that everyone's really clear on what they're doing. And making an agreement in advance, or if you've been working with these people already for a long time, it's okay to make the agreement now and say, look, could we have a quick conversation about how we work together effectively? I think if we had a clear agreement about a couple of things, that would probably help us be even more effective and successful. It's okay to have that conversation now. Have in your agreement or have a discussion about how you want to handle conflict. So if you're mad at me, what's the best way for you to handle that? Do you prefer to email me your thoughts so that I can read it and that helps you process things? Or should we talk about it one-on-one? You need to come up with kind of a compromise in some cases with people based on their personality type and what's going to work for them. So how do we handle conflict, disagreements, feedback? When you have this conversation, make sure that you ask them their opinion first, but have suggestions for how you guys can handle these things and what you can incorporate into your agreement. And these are some really good questions to ask during the course of this conversation where you're starting to create this kind of agreement. How can we work together more effectively, et cetera? And you'll notice, and this is going to come up a little bit later too, you'll notice when I just gave you this quick example, at the very beginning, I asked permission to have the conversation in the first place. Could we have a quick conversation about how we work together more effectively? You're not just bulldozing in and diving in and catching them off guard. You're asking them and letting them know what's coming up and kind of saying, is this an okay time to talk about this? Okay. And when you get permission from someone like that, they're going to be much more engaged in the conversation, less defensive, et cetera. As part of creating your agreement, and these can sometimes for teams be called a team charter. So you can have an agreement one-on-one with someone, but you can also have team charters. You might want to talk about your goals and your tasks. Every once in a while, people are not on the same page, and that's part of what's going on, and it's causing a breakdown in the system. Roles we've talked about, identifying challenges that you might encounter along the way, and how are we going to deal with those? How are we going to track our milestones and know we're being successful? Just like we said earlier, how are we going to deal with conflict, feedback, all of that? Being emotionally intelligent is talking about these things up front at the beginning, if possible, or if not, just creating some kind of agreement that creates that foundational safe space. And let's launch our second poll here, Yabby, while we could, if you don't mind. When you come up with, or when you encounter one of these challenges or disagreements or whatever, you can point to the agreement and say, well, we talked about handling it this way. Should we do that? So quick example here, and I know this is different from what we're talking about, but it's similar enough. When we start with a coaching client, one of the first things that we do is we have them sign an agreement about what we're promising them and how we work together more effectively. But we also talk with that client up front in the first session and say, look, here's the deal. To get the most out of the coaching, I need you to understand a couple of things. Sometimes I might interrupt you. I'm not doing it to be rude. I'm doing it because there's a specific piece of information that I want to get out of you. And I might need to ask things in a different way, or I might need to get you to stop because you're answering the question in the perfect way. And I want to elaborate on something specific. We tell them that we're going to give them tough feedback and make sure that they're okay with that. And again, I realize that this is, a different scenario, but the concept is that you discuss this stuff up front and you don't let it just be bubbling under the surface. It helps so much to get it out on the table as much as you possibly can. All right, great with the poll. Looks like 75% said they have not. So great new tool to try to start implementing. 25% have. That's fantastic. We do find, by the way, that this is helpful to have it in writing somewhere so everybody can see it and you know what you discussed. It can be a little less formal. It could just be conversational if that's better for your situation. And we also realize, excuse me, that you can't always have these types of conversations with certain people. That if it's a difficult situation, you may need to ask your boss for help. You may need to ask HR for help. You may need to get some support or advice on how to handle this a little bit more over time. But the goal is to get to this transparency as much as you can. Let's talk about a little bit more about communication. And there's two things here. So very specifically related to handling a touchy or difficult conversation with someone. It's a good idea to set the tone of the conversation before you start by asking permission, like I just said a moment ago. You can even let them know in advance right then that, could we talk about something that this may be a little bit touchy or hard to hear or difficult, and it's hard for me to talk with you about it, but I feel like it's really important for us to do so that we can get to a better place with our work relationship or our project or whatever it is. Okay, so tell them too that you are needing to talk about something that may be a little bit difficult. This will help drop their defenses so that the conversation can be a little bit better. And then obviously let them talk after you share. When you're having these types of deeper conversations with people, the emotionally intelligent things to do are to make eye contact with them. Don't look down or all over the place. Nod to show empathy and understanding. Lean forward to listen, and make sure that your arms aren't crossed, your hands are in your lap or something like that, so that you're showing or letting them know that you're open. Emotional intelligence is also about body language and how you're sitting and your nonverbal. So pay attention to those too. And the reason why we like creating this kind of agreement is we find that over time, even if you create the agreement kind of step by step slowly, it will improve your professional relationships because a couple of things. It establishes this clear boundaries for the safe space. So you've talked about how to deal with feedback, and you have the rule, for example, about it needs to be constructive. The second thing that's really good about it, and I know I'm going backwards here on the slide, sorry, it empowers each person to take responsibility for the results. So when you're having this conversation, you're not just taking ownership and saying everything's your fault or their fault. And also like that it's on you or just them to fix it, because that's not going to work. It's like, how can we work on this together, even if it's the other person's fault? Okay. Or if you feel that way, use we language, not you or I language. That's going to help get to a better place. And it creates ground rules to follow. Like we said earlier, it gives you something to point to that can help when touchy situations come up. Tool number 2 is empathetic listening. And it's funny because I always joke about this picture. I feel like my eyes are way too intense. So we want you to be empathetic when you're listening and focus on the other person, but also not scare them with like stalker eyes. Okay. I know that you've all heard about effective listening, probably ad nauseum over and over. We want you to consider these additional kind of nuggets about empathetic listening because everything in the workplace involves communication. We talked already about how much time is spent on workplace conflicts that wouldn't have to be. Two-way communication is critical, even if you feel like it's the other person's fault and they are being difficult. And what we find is that not everyone naturally knows how to listen, really express empathy, and show understanding. Okay. So we want you to consider, please, 3 different levels of listening. And based on where you think you may have some challenges or where you're more effective, you can pick and choose what you need to work on a little bit more. So level 1 listening is the listening we all have to do to take care of ourselves. I'm hungry. This meeting is boring. Why are we talking so long? We all need that, but we don't want to stay in our own head, especially if we're having a one-on-one difficult conversation or important conversation with someone. You can go to level 1, but get into level 2 and 3 as much as possible. Focus listening is where you're really listening, but you're also paying attention to their nonverbals and the nuances in the conversation. For example, if you're sensing that they're getting a little bit tense, instead of just letting that go, be like, hey, are you okay? Do we need to talk about that a little bit more? It just seems like you might be getting a little bit tense about this, or maybe a little bit less comfortable. That is the goal and the ideal. If you can call that out, we're not saying that that can happen tomorrow, but to getting to that point with people is really good if you can get there a little bit more. Let them know that they can trust you. Let them know that you know the conversation that you're about to have is completely confidential, so that they know that it's a safe space to talk with you about things. So level 2, focus listening, and level 3 is global listening. It's the energy between the two of you, the mood or the tone of the conversation, the mood or the tone of your team. If you as a leader, for example, or even as a member of the team are like, my team is dragging, we're not motivated, I feel like we're unclear about some things, like think about what is going wrong. And the emotionally intelligent thing to do would be to be like, okay, self-awareness, where may I be contributing to this? What could I do differently? And how can we have a conversation about this? Is it appropriate for me to bring something up, or do I need to ask the team leader, just share, I get a sense of this, I think we need to talk about it, can you bring it up? Whatever makes the most sense. The way to implement global listening for emotional intelligence is to listen and be quiet sometimes. Sometimes when I used to coach clients, I would literally have to be like, hold my, put my hand over my mouth for a second, because I knew I needed to let them get something off their chest or get something out for a second, and interrupting them at that time would not be the right thing to do. So take more time to listen and just be quiet versus talking all the time. I know as humans, we want to fix a problem. That's our human nature. In our coaching courses that I took a long time ago, they literally for a full day wouldn't let us give anybody advice or give feedback. It was only about asking questions. And it was virtually impossible. It's really hard to do that, but it's a very powerful tool. And we'll talk about questions in just a moment. Another thing you can do is slow down your talking, slow down your conversation with people. Don't step over other things that people are saying that your intuition is telling you, I might need to bring that up later or pick up on that, versus, we're so busy, I can't deal with that right now. Slow them down if needed, okay? And focus on, in a lot of cases, try to err on the side more, and we'll launch our third, and I think this is our last goal too. Err on the side of asking really good questions versus giving advice every time. I know in plenty of cases at work, we have to give advice. We have to tell someone what to do, show them how to do it, whatever it is. I get that. But if you just err on the side a little bit more of asking good questions, I promise you it will go so far towards the empathy, the trust, the listening, all the stuff that emotional intelligence is built on, and that really good communication between people, that it's going to help enormously by just using this one tool, asking questions more than giving advice. Okay. Give you a second to answer the poll. Thanks for that. Looks like we've got 100%. You guys are fast. I love it. Thank you. No, 65%. That's okay. That's why you're here. Think about these level 2 and 3, focus on those. And like I said, like try just in the next week or so to just be quiet a little bit more and sit back for a second versus diving in. Try to ask a question versus diving in. Just practice with these few things that can help a lot, okay? As part of active listening, here's an exercise that we'll share with you. That you can do with friends and family members just to practice with this a little bit more, but then also practice at work too. Have them tell you about a problem that they're struggling with. And instead of like trying to dive in with advice, you're only allowed in like the first 5 minutes of that conversation or whatever it is to reflect back what they're saying to you or paraphrase it. No questions, no advice. Or if you want to do the questions piece, you can add the questions in, but you're not allowed to give them advice. And it's so funny because most people will be like, oh yeah, no big deal, no problem. It's really, really hard to do this. So this is just a good active listening exercise that you can implement personally or professionally over the course of the next week, and just notice the changes that occur as a result. I wanted to point this out because as part of emotional intelligence, understanding the needs of followers within an organization, which includes you, it's pretty much any employee of an organization, is a really important piece to understanding if your teammates, the people that you manage, your boss, et cetera, anyone is getting their needs met. Because when their people's needs are not getting met, that's when conflict is going to arise. And sometimes thinking about what is not going well within your organization or within your team can help you be more emotionally intelligent about the action steps that you need to take and the questions you need to ask. The 4 needs of followers are listed here. They're trust, that you can trust your coworkers, at least within reason, professionally, that you have a sense of stability in your job, that things are going to be okay. We know where we're going. Hope, like my organization and my job is going to be okay, and that there's a mission that we're trying to follow and support, et cetera, and also that people in my organization care about me, at least to a certain extent, like in the professional way. Okay. It's a really good idea to think about these 4 needs of followers, maybe even print this out and put it on your desk, and think for yourself about these questions. What are your highest needs? Is there a conflict? Or if there's a conflict, is it a clash of values or priorities, or these needs not being met? And do you understand and really know your coworkers and people that you work with in order to be emotionally intelligent with them? Understanding these things will help you go really far with like understanding like how to work more effectively with others, and not just your own needs, but how to help meet their needs as well. Okay, before we get to our last quick tool and we'll do Q&A, just wanted to mention if anyone is interested in our coaching because they feel like they need more help than what we're talking about today, your situation is more in-depth or unique, etc., please feel free to email us. It's the same email as getting the slides. I always do a free strategy session with people at the very beginning to find out a little bit more about their needs and make sure that we're the right fit to help you. So feel free to reach out about that if you feel like you need it, because I know this stuff can feel a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Let's talk about tool number 3 for emotional intelligence, and then we'll get to Q&A in just a couple moments here. And this is curiosity, and it's the idea of asking questions versus giving advice, and even better, asking like really good, juicy, and kind of the right questions, if you will, to pull more information out of people, develop a greater sense of understanding, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the deal with this one. Being curious and asking questions of someone versus a question where you're judging or even just judging them in general will help diffuse a conflict, and even beyond that, develop a stronger relationship with someone. We already talked on the right-hand side of the slide about asking permission before sharing. The idea or concept with this one, with curiosity, is we'd love for you to start implementing the tool of what is called powerful questions. Powerful questions are open-ended. They're kind of like childlike in some way. There's no judgment in them. And they allow the other person to vent if they need to, explain if they need to, or identify a solution in some cases on their own. The bottom line with powerful questions is they don't allow for a yes or no response. And some examples are here on the left-hand side of this slide. A powerful question to someone would be, how can we improve our relationship? What's the best way to accomplish this goal? And you can put in with or without conflict in there, doesn't matter. But you'll notice here 2 cool things about these questions. They're not yes or no. They force the other person to start thinking of ideas and therefore be accountable for their part in things. And also, they don't allow for this isn't going to work. They assume and force a positive outcome. It's not, do you think we can improve our relationship? No, it's how can we do so because we need to do that. Okay. And that's why we like these. Powerful questions can be information gathering. There's some examples here on this slide, or they could be more curious and just open-ended when a more discussion is needed, when you need to have like a two-way conversation versus like you need to just gather some more information from the person. Okay. And as part of this tool, the strength, if you will, or skill of self-management is going to come into play enormously. And remember the four pillars of EQ, self-management is one of them. Trying not to judge. And even if you're judging in your head, it's not coming out of your mouth. And you're putting it to the side and saying, I'm going to bookmark that, put it over here. I'm going to have this better, productive conversation with this person. And if I need to come back to the judgment later, then I can do so. Okay. Working towards understanding first versus worrying about being right, who's right or who's wrong, forcing an issue, etc. It's like really trying to understand where this person is coming from. We had a client once who had a difficult boss. And when I asked her, okay, what's going on at work? This is, what's happening. I said, well, what's her personal life like? And she was like, well, now that I think about it, these were the different things that were going on in her boss's personal life that she realized in hindsight were probably impacting how she came across at work. And it helped her be more patient with her. Empathizing and asking questions first. Again, we've said this before, just to kind of reiterate. What is or should be considered or would be considered an effective, assertive communication, kind of a formula for it, is listed here on this slide. And this can help you with any type of conversation, including some of those more difficult or deeper conversations. Showing understanding is always first. You don't have to agree with the person to at least understand their perspective or empathize with where they're coming from. This does not mean agreement, okay? Sometimes it might, but it doesn't have to be. Making sure you're stating the facts, that you're not bringing the emotions into play at the beginning. You can bring those up as appropriate as you get deeper into things. And then finally, offering a resolution. When you're having a conversation with someone, the emotionally intelligent thing to do, if it's possible then, is to come up with, okay, what are we going to do next here? Have we addressed this concern or this situation? And do we have a resolution and like an outcome? If you don't, and you feel you need to table the conversation, that's okay too. An emotionally intelligent thing is also to say, I don't know that this is the best time for us to continue talking about this because I think we're both getting kind of wound up. What do you think about, like, let's bring this up next week, cool down, whatever it is. That can be an emotionally intelligent thing to do too. Okay, so our 3 tools, just as a quick reminder, and then let's go ahead and get to our action steps and Q&A. We'd love for you to write something down, action steps, share it in the chat. We'd love to see your action steps from there. Emotional intelligence, understanding what the foundation is. But the 3 tools are creating an agreement, even if it's not formal, like working that into your conversations a little bit more, the effective and active listening and empathetic listening. And then finally, those powerful questions, leveraging curiosity a little bit more to empower others and get into these deeper conversations as needed. All right, so let's pause and go ahead and write down one action step in the next week. That would be great. And I know we have one question here. So while everyone else is thinking of other questions, if you have them, we'll go ahead and answer this one. Please feel free to share those in the chat. And by the way, if you come up with questions that you'd like to ask later on, feel free to keep the email and email us later. I'm happy to answer. So one question, and we got some thumbs up to this one, any tips on how to slow down conversations, either your own talking or others? This is a great one. So for me, when I was coaching, it was easier for me to just like do something physical like this because the person couldn't see me on the other line, but with Zoom video, can't do that, right? So here are some of the things that I do. When I need to, like, when I know that I might talk too fast or talk too much with my hands, or like I have a reminder for myself. And so what I'll do sometimes is I'll hold a pen, and that helps me slow myself down a little bit, because instead of like my mind going a mile a minute, I'm like kind of fidgeting with something out of the screen. That's one idea. Another way to slow yourself down is like to put like a post-it note, behind the screen or whatever, and just literally be like, slow down. And what I mean by slowing down, like literally slow down your talking, talk slower and more deliberately. And that will help you slow your thinking down. And it also can help the other person slow down a little bit too. In some cases, if you're at the point in the relationship with that person where you can say, hold on a minute, I think we need to talk about this a little bit more. Do you mind if we pause for a second? Like, speak up and literally say to your team or to that person, like, let's slow down for a second because I think we might be stepping over something. Let's table the rest of our meeting for tomorrow, taking that leadership role and making a decision. A couple of ideas there. Someone shared an action step. Try the agreement with my assistant next week. I love that one. Thank you. Oh, and we've got Yabi was saying stuff too. So hopefully that helped you with the slowing down. What I find is we need to start with ourselves first, right? It's like the airlines say, put on your own oxygen mask. So the more you start to like, for example, adjust your agenda so that it's not so overwhelming, adjust your thinking. And like, for example, if your mind is going a mile a minute and you need to slow yourself down, you may need to have a piece of paper right there where you can write down the stuff that you don't want to forget that you're going to say later on. So have something right there. Hold on one second. Let me write this down. But there are ways to do it. Physical body motion, like sitting back a little bit more, can help you slow yourself down too. That helps support what's going on mentally as well.
Hey, Hallie, we had one private message come in. So this person asked, do you have any other tips to control emotions during conflicts?
Oh yeah. Okay, good. Because people said that at the beginning. I'm glad you guys brought that up. Couple of things with that. The self-awareness and just like slowing yourself down and pausing so that you actually know what you're feeling, or stepping away for a minute. Like you might say, I need to go get a glass of water, or excuse me for a second, I need to use the restroom. That can help you like get a better handle on your emotions, understand where they are. Like just literally walking out for a second and taking a break is one thing you can do. For other people, like they need to deal with their emotions, like through exercise that night, talking with a supportive friend or family member and like processing through that stuff. And they may need to say, I'm really pissed off right now. I cannot talk to this person about this for at least 2 days. So you might push the meeting back or, whatever it is. So giving yourself time and space in some way, shape, or form, it could be short, it could be longer, can help. Getting support, like through a therapist, a coach, having someone that you can vent with is so important. And I know that in some cases, your spouse or partner might feel like, or your friends, and I don't want to hear this anymore. So have several people that you can talk to. So you're spreading the wealth a little bit, and it's not always just one person. In the moment during conflict, per the question, again, I think it's okay to excuse yourself for a second. But what I would also do is, again, slowing yourself down, as we just said, can help you calm down a little bit, taking deep breaths too. And in some cases, like just focusing on controlling your breathing a little bit more can help you calm down. And sometimes holding on to like a pen or something else, like I'll fidget with a pen, or I might squeeze it really tightly. That could help too. So those are some ideas. Emotions are not bad. They're telling us something, that something isn't right with you, or not something's wrong with you, but like something's not sitting well with you that needs to be addressed or whatever it is. So don't try to avoid them and just completely stuff them down. Try to observe yourself having the emotions so that you can then be like, okay, what do I do with this? Is it appropriate for me to share? And if it's not, let me make a plan after this conversation for how I'm going to deal with it. So the goal is, as much as possible, it's not shoving them down and pushing them aside and not having them, but it's trying to become the observer of them a little bit more, because then you can be proactively managing them in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully that helps too. Someone said, and I want to say these two things because they're great. Creating an agreement with new team next week on a new project. Awesome. Happy to hear that friends are used to vent. I sometimes feel guilty for that, but can't help myself. Yeah, sometimes I can. And you know what? You can always ask your friend, like, I know I'm venting to you a lot. Is it becoming too much? And then, again, like spread the wealth a little bit. That's what I'll do. Those are
Perfect.
good.
So we had Francine wanted to ask a question. Feel free to unmute, Francine.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so Haley, just looking for some more strategies around emotional intelligence for this situation. Having a new leader who is much younger, who's coming in kind of with ideas and, visions everywhere left and right. I've explained to her, like I need time to process things, and I'm the detail person. And usually visionaries aren't the detail people. That's why they can spit out all this. And having explained how I work, and them using kind of triggering words like, she takes my need for processing as trepidation, wanting to maintain the status quo, where I'm just a very thoughtful planner or detail person. So having, and again, she's new, so having that environment, what are some strategies around emotional intelligence that I can add to my tool bag?
Sure. Great question. And I'm sorry you're in this situation. It sounds tough. And I think you're going to grow a lot as a result of it. Let's see it as a challenge. So, I'm glad that you did. The more you can explain to her, as you have been, this is my style, and try to structure things like you guys aren't going to meet every single day, or, as much as you possibly can is good. Related to that, what I find is people don't usually really hear us until like the 10th time we've said it sometimes. So just keep saying it and understand or know that some of it may just be like, it takes a while for people to really buy into it, believe you, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
keep doing that so that you can continue to communicate that way, and let her know. Ask her for what you need and be direct about that, and keep doing that. With the being, like a stickler, what she's calling it, that you're not as confident or whatever it is. I would honestly like take one of those online personality strengths tests, or, even something like that. And I don't want to shove it in her face. So we've got to be careful about that, but be like, look, here's who I am. And these are some of my personality strengths. So I hear you about, like, and if there is something I need to do to work on exuding more confidence, totally open to that feedback. And one of the things I know is that I think differently. And these are different personality types. And this is, personality assessment. And you could even just say, I took it years ago, whatever, to make it easier. But this is something, like, these are the strengths that I actually bring to the table. Are these things that we could use to incorporate to help me be more successful, like always keeping it in the positive? That's something that I would consider doing.
Yeah, I like that. And I do have my strength finders that I can share with her. Thank
Okay, good.
you.
Yeah, no problem. It's a good question.
So we have something in the chat, basically going off of Francine's question. So the best way to manage different working styles, especially if different than our own, a written communication plan. And I know you also mentioned using the strengths-based assessments, which I think is great as well.
Yeah. So strengths-based assessment, there's other free tools online that you could do to help understand each person's style. So you could even maybe suggest, like, do you mind if we take like one of these personality assessments? I've found they've been helpful in the past, because the understanding, like, people tend to assume that their way is the only way, sometimes in the right way. In the example of Francine, the question that you just asked, right? Like, that person is just not understanding that it's like, no, everyone has a different way of thinking and working and approaching. So assessments can be good. I like the written communication plan, and explaining a little bit more. And I'll use this as a quick example that might help. So one of our clients, she was starting in a new job, and she realized from her old position that because she was very calm under pressure type of person, that she may have been giving off the impression that she wasn't as worried about deadlines or didn't have a sense of urgency or whatever. So with her new job, she was very clear with her new coworkers, her boss, etc., to educate them or about her strengths and how she comes across. So any kind of things that you think people may be assuming or one way and they're actually the other, like to communicate with them about that and explain where you're coming from, because they may be making assumptions just because you're behaving one way when it's actually something completely different. So take that time to get in greater depth about things. And I do like the written communication plan, but explain why these things are important to you. Oh, because I'm more introverted or extroverted, because I tend to need to think about things a little bit more, or whatever it is for your situation. Facial language, nonverbals is the next question. Poker face. Yep, yes, or in a meeting. I know, especially when you're on Zoom. If you can hop off video and say something, you know, like whatever, you can't be on video, you could try that. No, but what I would do, again, this is where, like, if I'm, for me at least, if I'm holding something, I can keep a straight face and deal with things better, because I don't know, that helps me focus on like messing with the pen or whatever it is that I've got in my hand. And I'm much more effective at keeping a straight face. So I would think about that. I would remind yourself to like sit back a little bit, because that's going to help you be a little bit less anxious about things. And you're just going to have to make sure that, yeah, you're not rolling your eyes. Give yourself something maybe else to do where you're looking at the camera a little bit, but you're also over here taking notes, and that can help you take your mind off of it a little bit too. Oh, good. Everyone's saying it was helpful, even though they need to drop, which I totally understand. We usually like to end just before the hour like this anyway, because I know people have other meetings.
Perfect. So anybody else have any last minute questions? And like Hallie said, you guys can get in contact with her at the email, and then also in the follow-up email. So overall, just thank you so much, Hallie, for joining us. Everyone's already giving you great thanks in the chat. So thank you everyone that joined us. Please be sure to fill out the survey, and then you'll also be able to watch the recording if you need on YouTube. So I'll be sure to send that as well. But thank you so much again, Hallie, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Baby steps.
Yes, baby steps. Bye, everyone.